In TVI tonight, steelworkers leader Bill Sears confronts Sir Charles Villiers, head of the British Steel Corporation, in this, the 10th week of the strike. The chairman is Lou Gardner.
Good evening. As the steel strike enters its 10th week, hope for a settlement is mixed with anxiety. On the hopeful side, Mr. Bill Sears said at today's press conference that there's now very little difference between the steelworkers' claim and British Steel's so-called final offer. Not so hopefully, though, Mr. Sears believes that the corporation has not properly assessed the union's latest document and that, quote, progress will not be made at their meeting on Monday if BSC shows the same level of incompetence. In the TVI studio tonight, face-to-face on television for the first time since the strike started, are Sir Charles Villiers and Mr. Sears. Here's Lou Gardner.
Bill Sears, earlier today you said that the corporation had neither the ability nor the will to correctly analyse the value of your documents, that being the last proposals you'd made to them, and that they'd looked a gift horse in the mouth. What did you mean by that?
We produced a document for them, which in our view was making many concessions, which they agreed with, but we also put to them figures and suggestions which meant that over a 15-month period this agreement was very little in excess of what the corporation had already offered to us. But there was a difference in it. We had it worked out exactly, and I have the figures with me.
What is that difference?
And the difference was about 2% difference. Now, I don't know whether the corporation were fully aware of this, but let me tell you that Hector Smith and I were, with two presidents, sat with Mr. Scully and Mr. Greaves and his colleagues. We presented our document to them. They took half an hour to assess. They came back in, and Mr. Scully said, the document is weak. He said, we'll have to go to arbitration. 6 hours later, I asked him if he would quantify some of the points in our document, if he would evaluate the cost, if he would evaluate some of the concessions we were making, such as elimination of overtime at £90 million. He said, well, I haven't had time to do it. And yet 6 hours earlier he was saying it's no good, we want to send it to arbitration. Now, I think this is absolutely shocking. The further point to that was that when we reached the end of that day, we decided that we would adjourn in order that we could concentrate our minds on the points that each other had made and evaluate certain things. And on the Monday, Mr. Scully wrote a letter to me saying regardless of the adjournment, he was going to ballot the members, my members and his workers within the steel industry. Now, this is tragic because it's a departure from good industrial relation practice that never is normally done. Okay,
you've made quite a number of charges there. So, Charles, have you been looking gift horses in the mouth? Have you and your chief executive, Mr. Scully, been lax in the studying of this document? Is it true there's only 2% between you?
Well, we looked at this horse very carefully, and it was quite clear that it wouldn't last the course. It wouldn't jump the hurdles, because it was not strong enough to give us the change that we have to have in the future. All that we are talking about is creating change. We cannot go on as we are. I can remember saying that, Bill, in your conference in 1977. If we go on as we are now, we'll have to go down. And we've got to get change. And in the agreement that Bill presented to us, I'm sure it was very carefully prepared, it was too weak to get the change that we absolutely have to have. You see, if we don't change...
I'm sorry, Sir Charles. What is the fundamental change that is missing from their document that you want?
Yes. We want commitment in their document. Fundamentally, we want commitment to change. And that was written into our document, but when it came into the document that came back from the ISTC to us, that word commitment was just smoothed off a little bit. We will study, we will think about, we will consider, and so on. And we really do want this commitment to change. And that is very, very essential for us, because we have the ability to assess this. And it is really the underlying agreement to get change that we are on about all the time. That is what is at the moment dividing us.
Do you also say that there's only, do you agree that there's only about 2% between you?
I'm not going to deal with the numbers at the moment, because that's getting into negotiating, and I sincerely hope that on Monday we're going to get an invitation from you, Bill, and from the other people in the unions to start a proper negotiation. All I can say is that the agreement has to be based upon creating fundamental change in our whole industry, and that's the real point.
Are you prepared to give an assurance of fundamental change?
I don't agree with Charles when he says that things weren't strong enough, tight enough. We are a union that is based on change. For many years we've indulged in productivity deals, giving back to the corporation a tremendous share of labour costs. Indeed, we've moved from 33% of total costs down to 28%, which indicates clearly our desire to do that. And they know, and if Sir Charles was quite honest about it, he will tell you that my union has never been afraid of the sort of change he's talking about. And I'm very surprised that he's not willing to talk about the value of it. We're not negotiating because that agreement is in the past. But it would be very interesting to know his point of view in relation to the difference that lay between us. And if the public at large knows that there was only that small gap between us, and there was only some words between us, why didn't the corporation continue negotiations?
It does sound, Sir Charles, as if, I mean, it sounds the pair of you, you've been out on strike for 10 weeks now in an industry that is an ailing industry, and you're ripped like the captain and the first mate of the Titanic, squabbling while the ship's sinking, aren't you?
No, I don't think we're doing that at all. We are having a perfectly rational, sensible and necessary attempt to negotiate. Now, you see, we want to pay for productivity when it has been earned by people who've agreed to it. And the document that was put to us said it will be 5% guaranteed bonus from a certain date. But it left out the whole point of the thing, that this can only go, this guaranteed payment can only go to those who sign up the agreements, which means change. And there was a very big gap. Perhaps you'll be able to close it on Monday. I sincerely hope you will.
We agreed, Lou, to say this. We are fully committed to it, to productivity. And if you are saying to the world at large, as they are now, in the ballot, that here is X% on offer to you, full payment, 14.4% they're saying, why don't they indeed pay it to our people and say, well, there is X amount. That would have made a tremendous difference. We wouldn't be on strike now. There would be no question of it. But what they are putting to us in the form of a negotiating bonus is something that won't work out properly or quickly. I know that. I've been in this business now for 30 years. Charles hasn't been in the industry nearly as long as I have. I know exactly what the value is, and any of the examples you bring to me now, I can be able to dissect them, and I will tell you where they go wrong. And we've done that with some of the examples. This is not to say it isn't possible to make something work. But if we are going to give an enabling agreement, we want the enabling agreement in which we are agreeing to the corporation's request for multi-union bargaining and all the strings attached to the 8 or 10%, whichever it may be. That in itself, in any industry, is worthwhile of a reasonable increase. And in the final analysis, what they are offering is still a 4% reduction in the standard of living for workers in a dirty, difficult and dangerous industry.
Well, I'm bound to say to you that we don't work in the post office or in the water industry or the coal industry, which have more or less monopolies. We work in a very exposed industry with tremendous international competition all the time, and of course we like to pay workers more. But if we did and add it on to the cost of steel, we price ourselves out of the market, and that I think we do all know. So it has to be a pay increase linked to productivity which will not put up the price of our steel. That's the guts of the whole matter.
But is it a more attractive offer now that it appears that all the unions are coming to you, Sir Charles, with a sort of parcelled agreement that they've worked out between them? Is that parcel worth perhaps another point or two to you?
Well, that's what we've always wanted, and we welcome that. And we have wanted Bill to lead. We wanted Bill to lead the unions in steel. Now, how many times have we said that to you? I remember saying to you the very day I became chairman when we met, and we've said it ever since, still. And we firmly, no, I mean, this should be given absolutely a natural thing, that Bill should lead the unions in steel. We don't have to pay for that. We don't pay Bill's salary. No, no. That should come as a natural part of the whole deal. And I hope that he'll pick up the tab now and really run with it.
Bill,
I don't think you understand that, Lou. The point is this. I've always led my union and complete trust my members have in me. But what I would not do, and still won't do, is organise the other unions' activities for the British Steel Corporation. That is their job. It isn't mine. And that is the reason why they wanted us together. But at least on this occasion, and you made a valid point, we have come together, not because the corporation wanted us to, because our members in the field had seen a need. But you've made a valid point. The corporation said this was one of the stumbling points. We've overcome it. Now what is the value to it?
What do you think the value is?
I think it's about 4%, that value alone.
So he's asking for 4% on top of your 14.4.
No, I didn't
I'm
say
not
that.
negotiating. Now, that's something that he can raise on Monday, but I'm not going to negotiate that now. I think that is something that's absolutely basic to the whole negotiation that we've been trying to do for years and years. And when I came to the corporation, which was nearly 4 years ago now, I came just after there had been an agreement signed by Bill and many others and by Eddie Linton and other trade union leaders for many, many of these things that are now being renegotiated. And I'm sorry to say that turned out to be a rip-off. We did not get delivery of it. It was a right rip-off. And we paid for it and negotiated on it, and it was not delivered.
I think we're getting to very obscure points of trade union
But
and
it wouldn't be
industrial
fair to
relations.
allow that, Lou, without a response. I don't know which agreement he means.
I mean the January 1923, the January 23, 1976 agreement. And that was never really delivered.
All right, gentlemen.
It wasn't a wage agreement. That was a concession from the trade union movement to you when you were under dire circumstances of losing 400 million.
Well, it's very, very similar to the agreement we're on now.
Can I keep out of that bit of history, Sir Charles, and have a look at a bit of his more immediate history? Surely this is a strike that need never have happened. If you hadn't started with an offer of 2% plus productivity strings, surely if you'd started somewhere about 10 or 11%, surely there would have been no strike and all this would have been saved.
We started at 12%. We started at 2% for consolidation plus 10 for productivity. Now, at that point, Bill made, I must say, a mistake. I can only call it that. And he swept that 10% off the table. He said it was pie in the sky, and that dismissed the 10% for productivity, which is what we are discussing now. And if that 12%, 2 plus 10, had been maintained, we would not have had a strike. And I do think that was a very, very serious error that was committed early in that stage. I think it was your negotiating committee or executive committee that did that, and I'm sorry to say I regard that as being absolutely fundamental.
Did you make an error, Bill Sears?
No, I said before in answer to you that the corporation don't really understand what it's all about. They did offer us 2%, and that 2% was promised on last year's negotiations when we took 7% less than the national going rate. We took 8% as opposed to 16, about 14 at least, no 16. And we were promised this 2%. So in effect, they said, yes, we'll give you. But they said also, but you can earn 10% at local level. And to do that, you lose 12,000 jobs. To do that, you have to give us many strings of restructuring, multi-union bargaining, etc. But at that time, there were no other plans. When I said pie in the sky, it was an obscure thought in the mind of the corporation that we can do this, but there was no process for it. There was no machinery. There was nothing there. And it was really pie in the sky because they hadn't even thought it out.
So Charles,
I mean, that is actually not correct. We had thought it out, and at the time Bill said it to me, he had his hand on the document which set it out. So it was there, but it got swept off the table, and there it is. But now, what we're really on about is this, that unless we get change in the corporation, we are going to be costing the public somewhere about £1 billion a year for the investment, for the redundancies which are essential, for the losses that we will incur. Now, is it conceivable that we can go on a procedure which is going to lose us about £1 billion a year in one way and another? Now, we have to stop that, and that is what we are on now.
Sir Charles,
that is why these losses will have to take place.
But, Sir Charles, your change also involves the jobs of some 52 to 53,000 men. You can't expect, surely, any union to say, hooray, we welcome this change, we embrace it for the good of the nation, because there are jobs concerned, aren't there?
Of course there are, but don't you think that trade unions should, just as much as anybody else, recognize the dire situation that our country is in, where we are making half as many cars as a few years ago, shipbuilding orders down to the level of 40 years ago, and where the steel is simply not being demanded. We had a 30% fall in our order book over 3 months. The prospects are further steel down. We can't just go on and pretend it didn't happen. We can't go on making steel that nobody will buy. You know, in Wales, they've said we will give 48, the government has said, we will give to South Wales £48 million for restructuring. Well, now that's great, but if we had gone on exporting that steel, we'd have lost the 48 million in 6 months. So the size of the disaster which is facing the industry is one that the unions, I think, have to join us in. And I put it to Bill, we're in this dire situation, a desperate situation, we really should do it together. I offered you a steel contract as partners when I came in. I offer it to you again, because we have to do this together, the unions together and us together. And I hope on Monday we can get together on that basis. That's always been my vision.
Are you prepared to do it together?
I couldn't agree less with what Sir Charles has said than I do at the moment. I don't agree with the cutback that he is suggesting. I know full well that we would be reducing by about 2/5 the industry in this country out of all the reductions that there have been in the Western industrialized world. I know full well that we would be taking the total brunt almost of the European cutbacks if we go along this route.
Do you have faith in the management of British Steel?
If you let me go along at the same time as Charles did.
I was going to let you, I was going to add a little too.
Well, sorry, Lou, you go on, dear.
I was going to ask you, do you have faith in the far-sightedness of British Steel's management?
No, I don't. I don't, and I can tell you why. If one looks at the situation in 1967, we had 260,000 plus workers. We are now down to, in the corporation, about 180,000. On the steel side, we're going to finish up, according to them, with 100,000, producing somewhere over 14 million tons of steel. A little country like Belgium is going to expand to 18 million tons. We will not have enough steel for the industrial core of this country. And even whilst they're going down at the present moment, giving up 2 million tons of orders, they're not prepared to fight the government for the same sort of subsidies that exist to foreign steel makers, the very steel makers who are taking away the orders that they've lost in this country. They've gone down from somewhere nearly 70% of home orders to about 52%. Now, why did that happen? The management has succeeded in taking us from one disaster to another. And if we go along this route without fighting back, what will happen in South Wales is this. We will lose in South Wales, on the present plans, another 13,000 jobs. And then you multiply that by 7 pit closures. Then you add on to it the railway workers and others who are involved. And in total, you are coming to a massive number of job loss in South Wales that has already suffered tremendously from the ravages of the corporation. Now, how can people have faith in a management that's gone along this route? We will work with management, but we want a management that supports the worker too. And when you look at industries losing money, such as shipbuilding and such as the coal mines and others, they have people in control who are prepared to fight for their workers. That hasn't happened on this occasion.
Mr. Charles's management, you're saying that he doesn't fight for the workers?
He hasn't on this occasion. Otherwise, he would have insisted that the government, when they said they hadn't to give us an increase, he would have insisted that they had to have something to prevent this disaster of a strike, which secret papers from ITV have revealed where they were warned about before the strike occurred.
Have you not fought the government strongly enough, Sir Charles?
If we come down to the 100,000 workers that we are aiming at, we will be making the same number of tons per man year as the French do, but not as many as the Germans, and of course nowhere near the Japanese. So this is the first great point, that we have to get the manning of the industry right. The second thing is this, that we cannot in the steel be stronger than our customers. And our customers' demand upon us, and we have taken a projection 3 years ahead, is that it is going to be a falling demand. Now, it's almost incredible, but the present demand for steel during the 1980 year is back to the level of 1960. Now, that is an amazing thing. It is due to the lesser demand for steel absolutely everywhere. Now, I beg the unions not only to think about the union. I know, Bill, you're very absorbed in your union, and that is your life. But I beg you to be absorbed in the problems of the industry as well. And the steel industry has to face what its customers can actually consume. Now, we don't only have the steel problem, we have the British problem as well. And the British problem is an enormous increase of imports and a diminution of home production. You see this illustrated absolutely everywhere. Cars used to be 5% imports, now they're 50%.
Sir Charles, have you stood up to the government sufficiently? Have you fought your corner?
I fought my corner through the last 2 governments, day by day, every single time. And do you know that we have had by the end of this year, £2 billion of tax-free, of interest-free money. £2 billion of interest-free money. Now, no other steel company has had subsidies of that sort. Absolutely enormous. We are having £700 million in the current year, £450 million in the following year. Now, other industries, other steel-making companies have not had subsidies on this massive scale at all. And we have been told, I fought very hard for more money. I said, I must have more money. It's very difficult indeed. And the shareholder and the banker, which is the British government, said, no, you've got a good ration there, and you've got to live within it, and you've got to make your arrangements to live within it.
Looks as if you may get some from the common market to help finance retirement and redundancy. If you get that, could that be used for extra wages?
No, it couldn't be used for extra wages. It would be tied to early retirements. Now,
but you would be saving your own money. Could that money then be used for extra wages?
Well, no, what we would use is the money for retirement at an earlier age. Now, at 55 at the present time, we have 20% of our workers, that's one man in 5, is over 55. In Europe, it's only 5% there. So they have done their elimination of overmanning through early retirement. And that we like to do, and you'd like to do that, Bill, too. That's how we ought to get down together. And for that, I hope we can get money for Europe, and that's what we're on about.
Bill Sears, do you now expect, at least, given this long strike, a slowing up of the plans to get rid of 50,000 odd people?
There it is. It's in the paper already that there are secret steel papers saying very clearly that is the position. The corporation have told us the position. But I must make 1 or 2 points clear. We don't have overmoney to the extent that Charles Willis is talking about. Charles knows full well that on the production side, and it has been repeated, I finally got the message home to Sir Keith Joseph, that we have less members there, less workers, than any other of the industrial westernised countries. Now, that is the fact. Now, in addition to the tons per man ratio, false figures have been put out time and again by the corporation and other people, and all different figures. We've analysed that, and we have shown a comparison that brings us to the 200 tons of the German worker and 192 in the British worker, and that's what we've been capable of doing. And under those circumstances, if one is going to solve this problem, one has to get the figures right and agree the figures. If they would be prepared to do that, that would be fine. But never at any time have they been prepared to sit there, and Sir Charles is there, and he can tell you now that on a blast furnace, a steel furnace, concast plant, and so many of the modern mills, we have less workers than anyone else. In addition to this, we have the lowest pay in the whole of Europe. We're either half or 75% of everyone else. Now, that is their exact position. And we don't want redundancy or retirement pay. We asked them 2 years for retirement pay at 62, and they wouldn't give us it. We don't want it. It means loss of jobs. We are here to keep jobs in the industry.
But as we're nearing the end of the programme, anybody listening to you both would, as I do, I think that there is still an enormous gap between you. And yet, earlier today, you were optimistic of a settlement. Are you really optimistic that it can be a quick settlement?
If we are coming to the wage issue, we have put forward a document which the corporation will receive from us. No one else has seen it. But we are putting that forward. It helps them considerably. I have said to you that the very act of coming together is worth 4% to them. That alone, without anything else we may be asking for. And one would hope that they see this as the lifeline that I said on the last occasion and try to make a settlement. If they are prepared to do that, you can rest assured the trade unions will do all they possibly can to help the industry. But I'm certain of this. They are not prepared to accept these savage cuts that the Steel Corporation are proposing to inflict upon not only the steel industry and the workers within it, but on the nation. As a nation, we cannot afford to do it.
Sir Charles, your gift horse in the last minute of the programme has now got a lifeline. Are you prepared to take it? Are you prepared to pay a little more for this parcel that is now being offered?
Well, I think the lifeline might turn out to be a noose. I'm bound to say to you, what I've got to think about is not only the trade unions, but also the customers, because without customers we're nowhere, and the competitors and where they are going.
Is 14.4 still your final offer, Sir Charles?
14.4 is the offer that is upon the table with a strong agreement which has been agreed by many members of unions with whom Bill is now consorting. And I think that we've got to look widely at the industry and not just narrow-mindedly at the union.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. I think the public at least learned that there is a considerable gap there. We wish you luck. This debate that you've been watching will continue behind closed doors next Monday. Thank you very much for watching. Good night.